Here's another story of a person pivotal in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, Dr. John Washburn, who was the superintendent of the Brighton school system. And I met him around 1981 at a party where he walked up to me and introduced himself. And I was taken immediately by his charm and confidence. And he and I had this little fling for a while, but always remained friends. And in 1986, 5 years after we met, he was hospitalized at the Genesee Hospital, and his doctor was my infectious diseases mentor, Dr. Larry Chesson. And Larry and I consulted on John's case and agreed that he needed HIV testing. It took 2 weeks for the results to come back, but the test was positive. And then John became a patient and eventually became a patient at the Strong Clinic under the care of my colleague and good friend, Dr. Steve Scheibel. As John dealt with his illness, and part of it was being public about it. And he eventually went public in around 1988. And John was the first person in Rochester, the first public person in Rochester to reveal their HIV status. Eventually, John retired, and but was always the consummate educator. And what he did was he went out and spoke to education groups about giving kids information in schools about AIDS and about HIV prevention. The name of the talk that he gave was called No More Broken Hearts. And it was really very, very moving. But the idea was to give kids information that they needed age appropriate. It was controversial at the time, but he persisted. He moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and died there in June 1989. It was before we opened Community Health Network. And it was 6 months after his 50th birthday, where he had a big party with people coming from all over the place, helped celebrate this big, important milestone, which was John's birthday. John did another thing during those days when he was dealing with his diagnosis and talking to people about AIDS education. And that was establish a foundation at the Rochester Area Community Foundation for AIDS education. And when he died, his family turned the proceeds of the foundation over to Community Health Network, where we established the John Washburn Library in his memory, and did a number of programs and educational efforts, had a physical space in the clinic for patients to use as a library, and again, continuing John's legacy of AIDS education. So a lot of connections there, a lot of community participating in the effort, but a person who needs to be recognized as someone who made a difference.